Hello there, this is Al24 News. I'm Abdurrahman Kashour, streaming live from the capital Algiers. And coming up next in our program. Anti-apartheid hero Archbishop Desmond Tutu dies aged 19. The Nobel Prize laureate, often described as South Africa's moral conscience, died on Boxing Day in Cape Town. Villagers from Myanmar fled across the Thai border on fighting intensified between Myanmar military government forces and anti-junta military groups. Zionist forces have injured nearly 250 Palestinians protesting shutdown of a village in the northern part of the occupied West Bank. At least 16 asylum seekers died when a smuggling boat carrying them in the Aegean Sea capsized, Greek military officials said. Hello again, those were today's headlines. First, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate who helped and apartheid in South Africa, has died at the age of 19. President of Cyril Ramaphosa said that the churchman's death marked another chapter of grief in our nation's farewell to a generation of outstanding South Africans. He added that the Archbishop Tutu has helped bequeath a liberated, or let me say, liberated South Africa. Archbishop Desmond Tutu and this portrait by Islam Seed.
Friends, I send you my very warm greetings. I've been associated with Civicus since its inception over 15 years ago.
Sunday marked the death of the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, racial justice and rights activist and retired Cape Town honorary Bishop Desmond Tutu at the age of 90. As an uncompromising enemy of apartheid, brutal oppression of South Africa's black majority, Tutu, though non-violently, made tireless efforts to collapse it. A lively and sincere minister, used his lectern as the first black bishop of Johannesburg and later as the Archbishop of Cape Town, with frequent public demonstrations and public opinion on racial inequality at home and around the world.
Tutu's death on Sunday is another chapter of bereavement in our nation's farewell to a generation of outstanding South Africans who have bequeathed us a liberated South Africa. From the pavements of resistance in South Africa to the pulpits of the world's great cathedrals and places of worship, and the prestigious settings of the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony, the Arch distinguished himself as a non-sectarian, inclusive champion of universal human rights.
Since being diagnosed with a prostate cancer in 1997, for the past few years, he and his wife Leah lived in an elderly community on the outskirts of Cape Town. He was one of the most prominent blacks against abuse in the 1980s, when South Africa was captured by anti-apartheid violence and a state of emergency giving police and the military widespread power. Lively jokes softened Tutu's harsh message, otherwise warmed harsh protests, funerals, and marches. The 1984 Nobel Peace Prize underscores his position as one of the strongest advocates of human rights in the world. This is the responsibility he has taken seriously throughout his life. The Nelson Mandela Foundation said that Tutu was an extraordinary human being. He was a key ally to Mandela in the fight against apartheid and chaired the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the post-apartheid era. With the end of the apartheid in 1994, and the first democratic elections in South Africa, Tutu celebrated the country's multi-ethnic society and called it the land of the rainbow.
To a different matter, hundreds of residents of Fellow district in the southern parts of Maywadai, Myanmar, have fled to Thailand due to continuing clashes between Myanmar army forces and rebels. Myanmar army launched airstrikes and heavy artillery shelling on a small town held by rebels, prompting hundreds of people to flee across a river to Thailand. According to a local human rights group and media reports, more than 30 people, including children, have been killed by government forces in Myanmar and their bodies burnt. The Kerani human rights group said that they discovered the burnt bodies near Mosul village in Hoproso township in the eastern state of Kaya on Christmas Day. Stephanie Williams, the special advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations in Libya, said that the decision on the date of election as well as the eligibility of Saif al-Islam al-Qaddafi to run are private Libyan matter, adding that the process of removing mercenaries from the country is delicate and requires coordination with neighboring countries. Zara Fujani.
The UN advisor Stephanie Williams declared in her first press interview since assuming her new position that the decisions on the date of the Libyan elections, in addition to Saif al-Islam Qaddafi's eligibility to run, is a Libyan matter. Her statements come in conjunction with the Libyan parliament's affirmation of choosing a new government or maintaining the current one is an option for parliament. According to the United Nations, the spread of mercenaries in Libya is a violation of Libyan sovereignty. UN advisor Stephanie Williams stressed in this context that the process of removing foreign fighters from the country is complex and must be done with caution to maintain the security and stability of neighboring countries. The statement of the British Embassy in Tripoli, which confirmed its support for the continuation of the national unity government until the elections, angered the Libyan House of Representatives as it considered this statement an interference in the internal affairs of Libya. During the past 10 days, the UN advisor met hundreds of Libyans from different political ranges, including competing and conflicting parties, and everyone said that the Libyan people want elections that led to permanent solutions to restore the legitimacy of national institutions and to take people out of the transitional stages to stability and to prosperity.
Hundreds of Palestinians clashed with Zionist troops near an illegal settlement based in the northern West Bank amid rising violence in the area following deadly terror shooting. The Zionist troops attacked the Palestinian protesting the shutdown imposed by the forces on the entrance of the village of Burqa in the area. Marwa Bayor.
Over 200 Palestinian protesters were injured when Zionist forces fired live and rubber-coated bullets in the northern occupied West Bank. The Zionists also deployed stun grenades and tear gas containers to disperse the Palestinians. As a result, a total of 247 Palestinians were injured. 8 were injured by live bullets and 35 by rubber-coated bullets during the protests in Burqa village because of calls by Zionist colonists to march the Homs settlement near Nablus, which was evacuated in 2005. According to the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, at least 10 people among the protesters were hit by live fire from Zionists in the village of Burqa. Also, Palestine's health ministry said that a 17-year-old boy was seriously wounded and taken to the hospital in Nablus. Zionist troops reinforced its presence and sealed off the region in the Nablus-Jenin road to give a safe passage for about 1,000 Zionist colonists to march in the village, triggering protesters from Palestinian residents. The Zionist entity occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip during the Six-Day War in 1967. It later had to withdraw from Gaza but began enforcing an all-out blockade on the territory. The international law views the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as occupied territories and considers all Zionist settlement there as illegal.
The bodies of 16 Kurdish migrants who drowned while crossing the English Channel in November have been repatriated to Iraq, where their families were awaiting them. The victims were among 27 people who perished in the November 24th tragedy, the deadliest disaster since the Channel became a hub for clandestine migrants crossings from France to England. A suicide bomber struck a restaurant in the Democratic Republic of Congo's eastern city of Beni, killing at least 5 people and himself. The explosion took place at Inbox Bar, where people were celebrating Christmas. According to a security official in Beni, officials blame the Allied Democratic Forces the attack. The attack marked the latest violence in a region where Congolese and Ugandan forces have launched a campaign against suspected terrorists. More than 400 people were mistakenly tested negative while actually being positive on Christmas. Sidpath Medical Director Professor apologized for incorrecting messaging the 400 patients about the false results. Marim Zian.
After giving 400 people wrong COVID-19 test results on Christmas Day, Sidpath Medical Director Professor Anthony Dodds apologized in a statement and said that the people who were tested negative were actually positive.
Volume of tests that we've been contending with at Sidpath. Last night we incorrectly messaged 400 patients who had been swabbed at our centres from December the 22nd and December the 23rd. An emergency response team is now investigating the cause of this mistake, which is believed to be due to human error.
St. Vincent's Hospital's spokesperson said that everyone impacted by the mistake was contacted via text Sunday afternoon, and the team is now investigating the incident. The incident comes after New South Wales recorded 6,394 COVID-19 cases, with 458 patients hospitalized and 52 patients in intensive care units. New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard urged people to get vaccinated and said that everyone will get Omicron at some point at a press conference.
Bottom line here is that we would expect that pretty well everybody in New South Wales at some point will get Omicron. We're all going to get Omicron. And if we're all going to get Omicron, the best way to face it is when we have full vaccination, including our booster. The challenge for us in the state is to make sure that our health system can cope with that oncoming virus that is so transmissible. It's extremely transmissible.
The minister said that the majority of patients in intensive care units were unvaccinated, and the New South Wales government urged people to be aware of the new strain of coronavirus and not to be in contact unless necessary.
The Omicron coronavirus variant strongly continued its viral march across the U.S. on Christmas Day, throwing many winter holiday celebrations into chaos. About 70,000 Americans were hospitalized with COVID-19 as Christmas evening, according to data from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, an increase of about 2% from last week and about 50% from early November, but around half the peak of January. More than 6,000 flights have been cancelled worldwide over the long Christmas weekend, and thousands more were delayed according to a tracking website, as the highly infectious Omicron variant brings holiday hurt to millions.
According to FlightAware.com, nearly 2,800 flights were scrapped around the globe on Saturday, including more than 970 originating from or headed to U.S. airports, with more than 8,000 delays as of 1:30 GMT. On Friday, there were approximately 2,400 cancellations and 11,000 delays, while on Sunday, cancellations have already surpassed 1,100.
Vaccination for kids aged 15 years and up and booster for adults. Prime Minister Modi announced the delivery of COVID-19 jabs for kids and boosters for adults as experts were calling to expand vaccination to combat the new strain of COVID-19. Starting from January, India will provide kids from the age of 15 years old and plus with vaccines and boosters doses for healthcare workers and people aged 60 and beyond. COVID around the world is still spreading, and our news will always shed light over this latter. More in this paper by Zahra Furjani.
Europe is facing a surge of COVID-19 infections as a wave of the new Omicron variant is increasing. Therefore, some countries tightened their measures and took steps targeting the unvaccinated. Italy further tightened its restrictions, barring the unvaccinated from public spaces and enforcing mask wearing outdoors. Only people with proof of vaccination or of having recovered from COVID-19 can eat at indoor restaurants, go to the movies or attend sporting events. The French have been pouring into testing sites for days as the Christmas vaccination begins. About 6.2 million people, nearly 10% of the entire population, have been tested over the past week. In Germany, where rapid antigen tests have been a way of life for most people throughout the year, there are few enormous queues outside the country's thousands of testing centers, and appointments remain freely available despite the recent introduction in many places of so-called 2G plus rules, which require even vaccinated and recovered people to get tested before entering shops. The British government continues to battle a major rise in COVID-19 cases due to the Omicron variant. On Christmas Day, thousands were reported seen in line to take the booster jab, as the number of the daily new cases remained above the 100,000 mark, making it 3 days in a row. Earlier in December, Greek authorities approved vaccinating children aged 5 to 11 amid a surge in infections. The explosion in cases also prompted Greek lawmakers to approve mandatory COVID-19 vaccination for people over 60 in response to a surge in cases. If they do not get the vaccine by January 16th, they risk being fined €100 for every month they remain unvaccinated.
Gabriel Boric, a leftist millennial who rose to political prominence during the anti-government protest, was elected Chile's next president on December 19 by defeating far-right candidate José Antonio Cast, as concerns grow over the Jewish community in Chile.
Gabriel Boric, a 35-year-old left-wing lawmaker who has been sharply critical of Zionists and Chilean Jews who support him, was elected a president of Chile in a landslide victory this weekend. He won with 56% of the vote, 12% over his conservative rival José Antonio Cast, a right-wing pro-Zionist politician. The election left many Chilean Jews concerned since they had to choose between Boric, who has encouraged Chilean Jews to lobby for Zionist territorial concessions, and Cast, a right-wing pro-Zionist politician. Of the 111 Chileans who voted from abroad, 73 cast their ballots for Cast, compared to just 33 for Boric, according to Chile's national elections database. After the Jewish community in Chile congratulated the new president, he said,
"I appreciate the gesture, but they could start by asking Zionists to return the illegally occupied Palestinian territory."
Boric's criticism of Zionists is long-standing. As a lawmaker, he supported a bill proposing to boycott Zionist goods from the Golan, West Bank settlements and areas of Gaza Strip that came under Zionist control in 1967. Boric reportedly answered he would reply when community leaders opposed the Zionist policy in the Zionist-Palestinian conflict.
The Somali President Mohamed Abdullahi Farma accused the Prime Minister Mohamed Hassan Roble of having failed in responsibilities in organizing the election and announced that he was withdrawing him. Tensions between the President and the Prime Minister are recurrent, and the decision could trigger further issues in the Somali government. The Gambia's former leader Yahya Jammeh should face prosecution for murder, torture and rapes, according to a new report by commission established after the fled to exile 5 years ago. The long-awaited report released late on Friday recommends that a special international court be set up to try Jammeh and others in West Africa. But outside of the Gambians, the commission was set up in January 2017 by President Adama Barrow, whose election in 2016 put an end to more than 20 years of dictatorship. Yahya Jammeh, ex-president of Gambia, found guilty of a series of different crimes, including murdering civilians, torture, and rape. The accusation came after an investigation was conducted by the Independent Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission, which was set after a former president was exiled due to his rejection for accepting defeat in 2016 election.
A Gambian Truth and Reconciliation Commission reported on Friday that ex-president Yahya Jammeh was responsible for a series of killings, torture and rapes during his 22-year rule over the small country in West Africa. The Independent Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission was established when Jammeh left Gambia for exile in Equatorial Guinea after rejecting to admit defeat in 2016 election. The Commission's report, which follows a 3-year investigation into the crimes of the Jammeh period based on evidence from many witnesses. It was made public on Friday after it was given to the President Adama Barrow earlier this month. The Commission said that those responsible for those crimes be charged. Neither Jammeh nor his spokesman could be reached for comment. It also said that Jammeh, who led a coup in 1994, and his henchmen, including a personal hit squad known as the Junglas, were responsible for 44 specific crimes against journalists, including Data Hydra in 2004, ex-soldiers, political opponents, murdering 7 civilians and 59 West African migrants between 2000 and 2005. He also was responsible for the rape of 3 women. In its report, the Commission recommended prosecuting Yahya Jammeh and his coup perpetrators in an internationalized tribunal in a country in the West African sub-region. Amnesty can be given to those who confess their misconduct and express regret and guilt during the TRRC investigation. The application will be finalized within 6 weeks.
Spain officially announced the end of the eruption of the Cumbre Vieja volcano on the island of La Palma after activity that lasted for more than 3 months, during which accused had severe damage. Cumbre Vieja is now hibernating after torrents of Eva turned black and solid and layer of black sand ash covered the area. It will take years, if not a decade, to clean up, rebuild and reclaim the damaged spaces. The Taliban dissolved the Afghanistan Election Commission, a panel that survives coups during the previous Western-backed administration. Spokesman Bilal Karim said on Saturday that there is no need for this commission to exist and operate, referring to Independent Election Commission and Independent Electoral Complaints Commissions as well. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau urged Western countries to unite confronting China and believes that Beijing is working to strengthen the division in the Western camp. Hussein Berkan.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused China of turning some Western countries against each other, calling for a united front against Beijing to prevent it from using commercial interests to achieve this goal.
China is pushing us to confront each other while competing for access to economic opportunities in the country. A rivalry has erupted between us because we are capitalist democracies trying to improve our situation, especially in light of the extraordinary economic opportunities for the rising level of the Chinese middle class.
Trudeau called for strengthening cooperation between Western countries and forming a strong union between them, so that China cannot divide them and push them to work against each other. Trudeau's comments come in light of fraught relations between the two governments as China detained 2 Canadians for about 3 years on charges of espionage, while Canada arrested Min Wanzhou, chief financial officer of the Chinese Huawei Telecom Group.
After many delays due to technical issues, the world's most powerful space telescope is ready to blast off on Saturday to its outpost 1.5 million kilometers beyond Earth. The James Webb, taking 3 decades and billions of dollars to build, will launch from the Curie Space Center in French.
It took 32 years from the initial concept to the final design. The Ariane 5 rocket will launch in the James Webb Telescope from Guyana on December 25th, 1.5 million kilometers from Earth. The telescope will travel for a month-long journey to reach its far orbit. The world's most powerful space telescope is expected to return with new information that will help scientists in their understanding of the universe's origins and Earth-like planets beyond our solar system. Webb Project co-founder Don Mather described the telescope's unprecedented sensitivity on social media. Mather said on his social media, I cite, #James Webb Space Telescope can see the heat signature of a bumblebee at the distance of the moon. In terms of size and sophistication, the telescope is unparalleled. Its mirror has a diameter of 6.5 meters, 3 times that of Hubble's, and is made up of 18 hexagonal pieces. Arianespace, the rocket manufacturer, designed a custom-made decompression system to protect the delicate equipment from pressure changes at that stage. The intricate process will take 2 weeks and must be faultless in order for Webb to work properly. Its orbit will be much farther than Hubble, which has been 600 kilometers above the Earth since 1990. Webb is scheduled to be in service starting from this June.
Pope Francis called for dialogue between families and nations and brought attention to conflicts around the world in his annual Urbi et Orbi Christmas message and blessing, a message that has never been seen at this time of the year in this way. Britain's Queen Elizabeth spoke of the loss of her husband Prince Philip, remembering the mischievous twinkle in his eyes, an unusually personal Christmas message to the nation.
Although it's a time of great happiness and good cheer for many, Christmas can be hard for those who have lost loved ones. This year especially, I understand why. But for me, in the months since the death of my beloved Philip, I have drawn great comfort from the warmth and affection of the many tributes to his life and work, from around the country, the Commonwealth, and the world. I wish you all a very happy Christmas.
Sudanese security forces fired tear gas to disperse protesters in the capital Khartoum on Saturday, as tens of thousands of Sudanese protesters marched across the country. Demonstrators marched to demand civilian rule by restore after the military coup in 2015, or let me say 25 October, and more than 100 people were injured in clashes with police in the last week's protests. Sudan restricted internet ahead of planned mass protests Saturday against a military coup as security forces deployed across Khartoum, blocking key bridges connecting the capital to suburbs.
Khartoum state governor has warned that security forces will deal with those who break the law and create chaos. Activists who use the internet for organizing recent mass demonstrations had planned the latest in series of street protests for Saturday. 2 months on since generals launched their October 25 takeover. Military Chief General Abdullah Fattah al-Burhan held civilian leader Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok under effective house arrest for weeks, but reinstated him on November 21. The move alienated many of Hamdok's pro-democracy supporters, who dismissed it as providing a cloak for legitimacy for Burhan's coup. Protesters online have called for fresh rallies, encouraging supporters with slogans "No negotiations with the army" and demanding the soldiers back to barracks. The bridge connecting Khartoum across the Nile River to the cities of Omdurman and North Khartoum were blocked since Friday evening. Security forces also blocked the main street in southern Khartoum, where the protest organizers were planning to hold the demonstrations. Recent protests have seen thousands gather at key government buildings, including outside Parliament, the Presidential Palace, and the Army headquarters.
A Saudi-led coalition fighting in Yemen says it struck a Houthi rebel camp in the capital Sana'a as it is intensified an aerial bombing campaign against the Iran-backed fighters. The coalition, which backs Yemen's international recognized government against the Houthis in the civil war, said it destroyed weapons storehouse in the rebel-held capital, according to the official Saudi press agency. Authorities in Burkina Faso have declared a 2-day period of mourning after a suspect militant killed at least 41 members of a government-backed civilian militant in the country's desert north this week, a group that the government funds and trains to contain Islamist insurgents was ambushed on the Thursday as it swept a remote area in the northern Lorone province, authorities said. President Joe Biden came into office with a message, "America is back," and he promised that diplomacy would replace military power as the main instrument of U.S. foreign policy. His administration has been marked by some important key moments that shaped his foreign policy. More in this report.
As 2021 ends, U.S. foreign policy has demonstrated the American weakness on the world stage. Biden administration has indeed sought to re-up relations with key allies and position itself as a central player in combating global crises, but has faced criticism for failing to live up to those of a human right-leading foreign policy.
We'll stand up for our allies and our friends and oppose attempts by stronger countries to dominate weaker ones.
With a chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan in August, widely seen as the biggest failure of President Joe Biden's administration, withdrawal which was in line with the administration's goal to decrease military engagement in the Middle East, has left Afghanistan in a position where it has an acute humanitarian crisis that could lead to mass famine. The United States has regained leadership on some global challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change, while restoring alliances, resolving trade disputes with European countries, and upgrading partnerships in the Indo-Pacific region through the Quartet Security Dialogue, which includes the United States, Australia, India, and Japan, and the AUKUS initiative of the Trilateral Security Partnership, which includes the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom. America's relationship with its most prominent competitor on international scene, Russia and China, has witnessed many crises that occurred during the Biden period or continued since the Trump era, as managing the strategic competition with Beijing remains the determining framework for the relationship between Washington and Beijing under the Biden administration, which is same key doctrine of the Trump administration.
But we're not seeking, say it again, we are not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocs.
As for Russia, Biden attempts to start diplomatic talks with Moscow that has amassed tens of thousands of its forces along the Ukrainian border.
Algeria's steps are accelerating and increasing its export volumes regardless petrol industry. There are numerous initiatives to reflect the country's quest to expand its presence in the African markets. In Taman Rasset, Algeria aims are reflected in the detection of the first logistic base specializing in land and air exports to the African neighboring area.
Concerning the project, it is a very important move to refresh the country's economy and help creating job opportunities and develop this area in terms of investments. This logistic base will be a reinforcement to boost exports towards Africa, and it will be the front gate which can facilitate all the administrative procedures of exports in the region. There are other programs to be launched in the future, in which we are seeking to develop the field of transport in the area. We are studying the file of opening a long railways line to Taman Rasset to facilitate transportation.
Many people associate Christmas with shining pine tree, Santa Claus and stockings, but the holiday may take on very different forms around the world during the pandemic. Here is how Christmas was celebrated around the world.
Christmas is one of the most widely known and celebrated festivities in the world. Regardless of geographic location, each culture has its own unique style of commemorating this jubilant end-of-year occasion. Christmas preparations begin in England as early as mid-November. People embellish the area and collect donations for charity from tourists. In Germany, festive Christmas markets may be seen in many cities' main squares, and Christmas trees are put up on Christmas Eve, December 24. People in Australia go to the beach for a barbecue, a loud game of backyard cricket, and a rendition of the White Christmas song. People queued for hours to get tested in New York City, where Omicron has spread rapidly. And many did it as a precaution before flying to see family. Brianna Sultan and her daughter Ava waited in one of the huge lines for a test on Friday. Sultan said after more than 2 hours in line in a New York City Harlem neighborhood that it's a terrible way to be spending Christmas Eve and that it is terrible that we can't see our families because this COVID strain is coming back again. Chocolate stores, farmers markets, and testing centers were packed with Parisians. Despite the fact that daily COVID-19 infections are at an all-time high and hospitalizations are on the rise in France, the government has refrained from enforcing curfews or closures during the holidays. Fabien Maximovic said that it does affect our enthusiasm to celebrate Christmas. It does make us a bit sad. but at least we're sure not to contaminate or get contaminated. We will all do the test in our family, while she was waiting in the line at a pharmacy in Paris to get tested.
Sport now. The Premier League COVID invasion pushed the English clubs to postpone the Boxing Day games, which is a new measure to stop this virus. More in this report.
Two Premier League matches and a week of training might have fallen victim to a coronavirus outbreak, but not a second has been wasted in the hands of Rangnick. Areas of improvement have been pinpointed, swift and decisive decisions have followed.
Well, as far as I could see today in training, they're all in good shape. All the players, they did their homework. They all had their schedule to train at home, and all of them just they stick to that schedule and to that program. So from what I saw today in training, I can say most of them, if not all of them, might be available. And of course, I would have to take some difficult decisions: who will be in the squad, who will be in the starting 11.
One of Rangnick's first acts was to bring a sports psychologist to Old Trafford, with Sasha Lindsay, a close confidant during his tenure at Leipzig, joining United's backroom staff. Everton had an initial request to postpone the game rejected on Thursday, despite boss Rafael Benitez claiming he only had 9 outfield players fit. While there have not been further COVID-19 cases at Everton, there has been a number of players unable to train who were originally on the fit list. Camilo became the undisputed super middleweight champion this year, extending his dominant era, and the 4-weight king will now seek a fresh challenge in 2022. Alexander Usyk back at cruiserweight could be the greatest threat to Canelo.
We hope Fraser Clark in 2 or 3 years' time will be part of that. So it's really exciting, the blue ribbon division, isn't it? It's fantastic. But at the moment, Tyson Fury stands as the premier heavyweight, in my opinion. Alexander Usyk, has claimed to be. I think he's one of the best pound-for-pound fighters, no doubt. Top 2, 3.
Canelo can win a world title against Ilunga Makabu, but if Usyk gets back down in weight, then he has already proven himself as undisputed king in that division.
Coming back to Algeria, on the ground of Habib Bourqal Stadium in Oran, during the 10th round of the Algerian Second Division Championship, Soufiane Loukan, 13 years old, breathed his last after falling unconscious in the 35 minutes of the match. And after announcing the death of this latter, all the players of both teams, Oran Association and Mouloudiyat Saida, fell down crying when they heard the shocking news. The death of the Algerian player Soufiane Loukan pushed the whole world to react toward the tragic incident, where all the world news channels and news agencies couldn't pass through without mentioning the death of Soufiane. The football international players of the Algerian team all declared their stands with Soufiane's family, such as Rais Wahab Mboulhi, Baghdad Bounejah, and even the French player Franck Ribéry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Take care of yourself. Good night.